Chain smoke your problems away. Smoke Pit Fairy Tales Part 4, Chapter 34, Volgograd. Fire erupted from the anti-ship batteries around Volgograd's port. The mechs on the Serapis ceased their farce and fired into the port. The Vengeance and Alliance aimed their guns at the sources of incoming volleys. Thatch watched the batteries explode and held onto a stray pipe as the ship flew into port. He screamed.
Full stop!
And Khan brought the vessel to a halt. The Serapis slammed onto the port's dock, throwing all the Marines off their feet. When they stood, they felt the island's pull and realized they were once again subject to the laws of gravity. Thatch let go of the pipe he clung to and looked out of the hole in the hull. His Marines had made it to the guns and were firing at the Russians' defensive positions.
Are we in?
Khan asked over the net.
Yeah, easy part's over. I have our Marines on the forward gun decks. Make your way up there. I'll meet you up there in a few.
Roger.
Thatch looked back to space. The mechs made their way into the port, blasting the interior gun positions and decimating the Russian infantry. The enemy managed to seal off all the transit spokes to the colony, besides the one to the south. The present mechs held the final spoke open. Another pair landed on the colony and set up a landing pad for more Marines to land. Landing forces from the Vengeance and Alliance hit the port and stormed up the south spoke, reinforced by smaller mechs. Khan rallied 1st and 2nd Squad and took them to meet Thatch by the gangplank. On the way down, they linked up most of the platoon and the remnants of Kilo Company. Captain Rodzer, Benjamin, Duke, alongside a motley crew of junior Marines, found them as well.
Who's the senior man?
Rodzer demanded.
I believe you are, sir.
Khan answered.
How'd that ship get down here?
Duke asked.
I took the helm in the engineering room, and Sergeant Allensworth guided me by radio.
Khan looked at Thatch's position on her HUD.
He should be down here in a minute.
How'd that work? We haven't had comms with anyone since we got aboard.
Allensworth was complaining about that too. Comms been shit. I don't know how our link wasn't severed.
Khan watched Thatch run up behind the officers.
Gents?
Thatch waved.
Hey, good work getting us here.
Rodzer slapped Thatch on the back.
It was this or just sit out there.
Thatch looked out the port door.
And it's not looking too good for us out there.
No, it's not. We better get going inside. The longer we stay here, the more fucked we're gonna get.
He looked over the Marines in front of him. Half a company's worth of Marines were left from the battalion, and he was the senior officer.
All right, Marines, everyone roll calm the India's freak. I'm taking command.
Rodzer pointed to Duke.
Staff Sergeant, get us up that pipe.
Aye, sir.
Duke gave the arm signal for the Marines to follow him and trotted off the ship with what was left of the battalion in tow. Silver walls lined the spoke over a concrete road. Bodies of fallen Russians and Marines carpeted the ground. Bullets hailed from the far end of the tube. Cover and concealment were non-existent. A pair of mechs linked their arms together and lumbered down the path, with Marines following them in a single fire line, trying to let the rounds hit the metal monsters instead of them. For 7 hours, the Marines snailed behind the machines. The mechs expended all of their ammunition less than 2 hours into the trek. When they reached the lip of Volgograd's guts, the Marines bounced from behind the mechs and shot the Russian defenders while the mechs swung at them with their metal arms. Duke looked down into the colony. Trees lined the perimeters of the bottom half. Between them was farmland, with a 50-meter river in the center. A railroad on a bridge stood over the water. The upper half of the colony was comprised of glass and mirrors reflecting in the sun. Machine gun fire erupted around Duke, killing the Marine to his left. He dove into the trees to the west and called back to the Marines.
We're in the farms. The garrison is to our east. There's no way we're going to be able to punch through that with our current strength. We're going through the trees west. I'm throwing smoke. Get through that and towards me.
Duke pulled the pin on a black smoke grenade and tossed it in front of the entrance. He couldn't quite tell where the gunfire was coming from, but he needed to cover the Marines somehow. They flooded into the small forest overlooking the grain fields and took defensive positions. Rodzer found Duke again.
We just had 2 more ships land. In an hour we'll have about a regiment aboard.
That's good news, sir. What are our orders?
They haven't changed.
Duke scoffed.
I'm gonna make the call to hold this position until more Marines land so that they have a clear path down the spoke.
Roger.
Duke relayed the plan to the Marines in the woods. The corporals and sergeants gave the Marines orders where to dig in and assigned them fields of fire. The Russians never let up their defense. Standing up was suicide. Thatch crawled through the woods giving his Marines orders. The leaves on the ground crunched under his arms. He hadn't ever seen piles of fallen autumn leaves before, but he didn't have time to admire them. 100 meters away, just past the end of the grain fields, the Russians fired at the Marines from the housing area. Their bullets splintered the trees. Thatch watched as a Russian platoon ran past the building and into the forest on the far side of the ring.
They're gonna have us surrounded here soon.
He scurried, hugging the ground towards the captain.
Sir! What, Sergeant?
Sir, they're moving along the opposite tree line. Pretty soon we're not going to have anything to take cover under.
Rodzer shook his head.
There's nothing we can do about that. We're holding this position until reinforcements show up.
Captain, there's not going to be anyone here left alive if we stay here.
We're holding this line.
Captain Rodzer stood his ground.
Keep your position secured.
Thatch stared down the captain, then looked at Duke. Duke sympathetically shook his head at Thatch.
Aye, sir.
Thatch begrudgingly returned back to his squad's position under the hail of Russian machine gun fire. His Marines were conserving their ammunition, only firing when they had a clear target. Thatch kept his eyes on the Russians moving through the opposite trees, 100 meters away. A shriek ripped from the housing area. The dirt under the Marines shook, and a shockwave ripped apart the woods. In an instant, fire, splinters, and shrapnel spread over the Marines' position. Thatch was lifted a foot off the ground and slammed back into the deck. Sharp pain spread over his body for a moment, then settled as a blanket of dull throbbing.
What the fuck was that?
Akan screamed. A Russian mech stomped at a petty pace towards them from housing. Thatch tried to orient himself while he suppressed a wave of fear and confusion.
God damn it!
Thatch grit his teeth.
Akan, you see that thing?
Yep.
Another explosion rocked the entrance. Thatch and Akan looked back up the burning pyre of flames, then further down into the colony. First Sergeant Alires ran out of the smoke, waving his hand, wildly screaming.
Go, go, go! Get across the lake!
Thatch looked down the woodline and barked at his Marines.
You heard him! Let's move!
The Marines on the colony side of the fire sprinted towards the water. Russian machine gun fire ripped through the trees. The colony's bend was between the Russian position and the water. If they could get there, they'd be safe for a moment. Another burst of gunfire swept across the Marines. Scott took a couple of rounds to her leg, pushing her to the dirt. Scott moaned on the ground and grabbed at her wounds. McKenzie and Capulet were behind her. Without stopping, they scooped her by her arms and drug her through the trees, trying to keep their heads down. Lighthouse hit the lake first. He stopped for a moment and looked back to Akan. He didn't know what to do.
Cross the lake!
Akan screamed. Lighthouse jumped in the water and swam across the bottom. The water disrupted his communication signals, but he could still hear the muffled buzz of orders being shouted. McKenzie and Capulet took cover behind the last few trees. They each pulled out a tourniquet and tightened them around Scott's legs. Scott screamed as they clamped them down.
Shut up, you're going to be alright.
Capulet barked at her.
You ready?
He asked Mackenzie. Mackenzie nodded. The two of them grabbed Scott's arms and ran her into the river.
Are your oxygen system still up?
Capulet asked Scott.
Yes, Corporal, but I can't feel my legs.
Yeah, there's no blood flowing to them.
Capulet pulled her along the lake bed. Alires called to the Marines underwater.
Get over to the bridge, use it for cover, and to pull yourselves along.
Thatch oriented his Marines to the structure. Metal stanchions rose from the colony floor to the railway overhead. They grabbed the columns and pulled themselves to the other side of the lake. Less than 40 Marines made it to the lake. Alires hailed them over the radio.
There's a park ahead leading to housing. I want India to push through the outer woods.
He pointed at the hodgepodge gang of Marines from various units.
You go through the interior. We'll relay in the forest past housing before we push to the hospital.
Thatch and Akan signaled for their Marines to follow them. They swam across to the far side trees and climbed up the ridge into the foliage. As Thatch pulled himself past the first row of trees, he saw the Russian soldiers he'd seen earlier running towards housing down the line. There were only about 10 of them. He checked behind to see if any of them were coming up the rear. When he confirmed there weren't, he cleared the water from his rifle and fired into the tightly packed squad. 6 of them fell before they realized where the fire was coming from. But by the time they oriented themselves, Chuck and Capulet finished the others off. They sprinted until they hit the housing area. Fire erupted from the concrete cottages towards the Marines. Most of them were still in the woods. Thatch, Akan, Capulet, and Lighthouse hugged the face of the first building. Muzzles flashed from a foot above their heads. The Russians hadn't seen the 4 of them. Thatch slapped Capulet's arms and imitated pulling a pin from a grenade. Capulet nodded, produced a frag, and showed it to the Marines around him. When everyone knew what was happening, Capulet pulled the pin, flipped off the spoon, waited 2 seconds, and lobbed it in. The Russians stopped firing and screamed at each other. Only half a sentence got out before they were ripped apart by shrapnel. The 4 of them leaped into the windows, muzzle first. They poked the 5 Russians in the eyes with their weapons to make sure they were dead. Akan called in the rest of the Marines. As the Marines jumped into the broken windows, dodging rifle and machine gun fire, a fire team of Russian soldiers kicked through the front door. Chuck and Stockton opened up on them. None made it more than 2 steps inside. Smoke grenades popped into the house, blinding the Marines. They were followed by a series of flashbangs that were negated by the Marines' helmets.
They're coming in!
Capulet shouted. No one could see the enemy until they were almost too close to shoot. Akan shoved her muzzle into a soldier's chest as he appeared out of the smoke, knocking him back before she pulled the trigger. She struck the next one with her rifle butt.
We need to get out of here!
Yeah!
Thatch concurred. As he watched his Marines defend their position, hook, tooth, and nail, he primed a couple of incendiary grenades.
I'm throwing flames!
He waited a few seconds until there was an opening and tossed the grenades into the street. With the road on fire, the Russians unable to move towards them, and the smoke masking their movement, Thatch ordered.
Get to the next building!
Akan led the charge across the street, almost dancing through the bullets. Stockton threw Scott over her shoulders and sprinted out after the next three Marines. Thatch and Chuck were the last two out. Akan shouldered her way into the next house. She quickly cleared the empty room, and the Marines poured in like a flood. Stockton put Scott on the couch and readdressed her wounds. The tourniquets were holding, but Scott wasn't going to be alright for long. Stockton plugged the holes with coagulant tubes, then released the tourniquets and tied them back up. Lighthouse peeked down the hallway and saw soldiers running towards the previous house through the window.
Sergeant, I don't think they know we're in here.
Akan peered around the door jam.
Yeah, but they'll be in here as soon as they realise we're not over there. Thatch, we gotta keep moving.
How many are out there?
Akan looked back out the window at what seemed to be the entire Russian army.
All of them.
Thatch looked around the room.
Any ideas? I'm open to suggestions.
Chuck searched the room, opening the doors to closets and stairs until he found a staircase that went down.
There might be a way out through the basement.
Take your team and go check.
Chuck took his Marines downstairs. The basement was dim and lined with tools and book-filled shelves. He spotted a manhole in the floor and used his knife to pry it open. No light came from under the ladder leading below. Chuck flicked on his lamp and slid down the hole. At the bottom was a tunnel that seemed to circle around Volgograd. Chuck looked up the pipe and gave Vickers a thumbs up.
Bring them down.
Not 2 minutes later, the Marines were all below. They had to use cord for Scott's descent, but they were shortly back on the move.
Any station, India 1.
Thatch radioed. He got nothing back but static.
Great.
What's the plan?
Head down this way. Try to pop under the hospital. Hopefully Ivan's too distracted by the other Marines landing to deal with us, and we can grab a sample of the weapon and pop out.
What's our escape plan if we can't get back to friendly lines?
Improvise. There's gotta be a shuttle or something we can jack.
Stockton looked at a flashing red square on her HUD.
Hey, I'm about out of oxygen.
Thatch and Akan looked at each other, then gave the order for their Marines to take off their helmets.
All right, let's try this again. I've tried to record this video like 3 times, but the fan keeps coming on and I'd rather not scream into the camera. Anyway, thank you for listening to another chapter of Chainsmoker Problems Away. As always, if you don't want to wait for me to read this to you, you can always go get the book on Audible, or you can get the paperback on Amazon, or if you're feeling really frisky, you can go on the website and get the War Chest. And the War Chest is a custom painted 50 cal can, and they're serialized. We'll get to that in a minute. This is number 0, it's the prototype. But it's full of these fairy tales novels. Well, it's got the first 6. The War Chest Mark II's got the second 6. And the War Crate's all of them. And inside this puppy, we got some stickers. We got some cards. And actually one of the cards is the title slate for this video. So that's fun. And then we got some patches. Actually, this is the original patch that I made. I think I made these before I started doing the War Chest and just ordered a fuck ton of them, but I've only got 2 left, and that's gonna go to War Chest numbers 49 and 50. Now, you might have noticed me say that a few videos ago, that these 2 are going out to, 49 and 50, or 149 and 150. War Chests haven't been going anywhere recently, which is kind of weird, because like normally this time of year is like my, I don't know, big selling season. People normally, do the tax turn thing with that. And the fan's not coming on, but now the battery's dead. Yay. Do I have another one charged? This battery's got a little bit of juice. Fuck it. Anyway, tax season is normally where the, bulk of these sales go during the year, because the war chests are a little bit pricey, because, I gotta buy all that stuff before I send it out, and that's what, each one of those is $6, so that's $90 there, the box is $20, I have to have all that stuff shipped to me. The cards and stickers are negligible, I get those in bulk, so I think fucking they end up being like, something like 5 cents a piece or something. Patch is a little bit more than that, but not too much. But then I gotta ship it, and, Uncle Sam gets his cut. So, I understand why it's not, always out. Oh yeah, the birds are back. But art sales are in the gutter too. If you paid attention, I paint too. I just don't do it a whole lot on this channel because this channel's about the books. But it's been pretty weird because I can't take it super personally. I know I sound like I'm complaining, I promise I'm not. But my other writer and artist friends too have been taking a fucking huge hit this year so far. So it's not a me thing, it's kind of like a in general everybody at this level thing. That furnace just ticked. Please don't turn on for a few more minutes, man. But yeah, I don't know what's up with that. Oh well, figure it out, right? Anyway, if you get the war chest, I do put your name at the end of the credits in these videos. Same thing with people who subscribe to the Patreon, which they get these chapters as soon as I get done editing them, and we're 3 or 4 chapters away from the end of book 5 over on Patreon. So, thanks peeps for tuning in there. Same thing with, not same thing with, but the name thing also with channel subscribers who get these videos as soon as they upload them, which I'm trying to get better about. I'm recording this Thursday, and we'll see if the battery fucking hangs on long enough for me to finish the video. So I guess I should probably wrap this up quick before I just keep rambling. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Thanks to all of you, comment and like and share and all that fun stuff. Oh, also, one of the things I was gonna say, this card, which was the title slate, there's prints of this on the site too. It's not all just, big painting paintings. There's prints on the site. Most of them were Smoke It Fairy Tales related, though. Not all of them. Yeah, anyway, I'm gonna get lost before the battery dies and I lose my fucking mind. All right, you guys have a good rest of your day, and I will talk to you next week. All right, here are your bloopers. Ciao.
Chapter 34, Volgograd.
Testing. Testing for Chapter 34. Test. Volgograd!
Test. How we doing?
Volgograd.
Закнёвит его вообще.
Volvo.
Признание его обвязание.
Fire erupted from the anti-ship batteries. Batteries.
Колотьё.
Well, Mr. Obvious. The car doesn't run on batteries. It's gas-powered.
Take one.
Yes, indeed.
All right, chapter 34? Yeah, chapter 34. There's only like 3 lines. 3 lines. 2 lines.
Captain Rodzer, Benjamin, Duke, along with a motley crew.
I took the helmet engineering.
They flooded into this fall. The leaves on the ground crunched under his arms. He hadn't ever seen pile. Why can't I read certain sentences for no reason?
Признание его обвязание. Я собрание тебя тратнут.
Stockton put Scout on the Scout.
Я тратнут.
Chuck flipped on his lamp. Flick. I somehow said a K and an M at the same time.